It is on. Okay. If you're here and you would like to sign in for Peg, that would be good. He's going to send around a note asking you to sign in. Print in. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes that Deb sent out.
So moved.
Me?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mayor Cadger, anything beyond the agenda items?
Nothing additional.
Okay, public speak, anybody here besides what's on the agenda items? Okay, I'm gonna move to the largest item because I promised our planner that I would do that first at $192,500. It is the one that received the most scrutiny from at our meeting, and since I'm the chair of the CPA, I'll introduce it. And Jamie is here and Jess is here to answer questions and to correct me, which I'm sure might be needed. This was a request from the Housing Authority, Housing Partnership, and we have Kathy.
Yes.
Kathy Kroll here from the Housing Partnership, and Jessica Allen, who, from the planner's point of view, administers these kinds of things. As you can see by the request, there were two areas which they hoped to use the funding for. One is for first-time home buyer, and the second one is housing rehabilitation. First-time home buyer involves a vendor the planning department, I guess, that submits a CPA, or I'm sorry, an RFP for the vendor to be the administrator for the home buyer counseling.
First-time home buyer, yes.
Yeah, first-time home buyer counseling administration, et cetera. And that person administers, but the planning department oversees it.
Yes, they would be a subcontractor.
The Housing Rehabilitation Program will be contracted to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Correct.
They're the administrators of that particular program.
But we oversee them as a subcontractor.
Right. In other words, these are loan programs, or both of these programs have a considerable amount of taxpayer money involved, and our planner and our finance director are overseeing in a certain way to make sure that they are done properly. Some of the details I'm going to let Jessica go into on the housing rehab program. There is a budget listed on the back page. It's basically if I'm right, they can borrow money up to a certain, why don't you tell?
Okay, so really the focus of this is doing housing rehabilitation projects outside the community development block grant target area. And I think both of you came to the last public hearing for CDBG, so if you remember, there was a map and there's a very specific area where the monies can be spent using CDBG funds. That's really targeted to where our low mod income individuals live in the city. But there's still considerable need outside that target area for housing rehabilitation. And we have a wait list of about 50 people for housing rehab. And there's several folks on that wait list that live outside the target area. So this money is to be used for those out of the target area housing rehab projects. And so the funding is to do about 3 homes. And in the past, when this money was appropriated through CPA for out-of-target HR programs, we were able to do 4 units because it depends on how much work actually needs to be done. Really what we're doing is getting these buildings up to code, that we're making them healthy, safe, dealing with lead issues if needed. And so it could be 3, it could end up being 4 depending on where the numbers play out. And the administration is done by PVPC, and there's a lot of administrative work that is through this program. You have to qualify, you have to make sure that the homeowners are qualified as low mod income individuals. So there's a lot of paperwork in there, and then there's a housing rehab specialist that goes out and does an inspection of the house and drives up the scope of work of what needs to be done in the project. And then they do the bidding out of PVPC's offices. They have an approved list of contractors. So they work with the homeowner. The homeowner then has an agreement with the contractor and is working directly, and PVPC sort of is the entity that helps the homeowner working with the contractor.
Does PVPC get the contractor, or does the homeowner get the contractor?
There's a bidding process, so it's
Okay.
the lowest bidder, but if the homeowner wants to select another contractor on that list, they have to pay the difference between what the low bid is and what the
Okay.
next bid is, so they have to put their own money in.
Okay.
The way that it's run is it's a 15-year deferred payment loan, which means that whatever the amount of money is that they need to do the rehabilitation, over a 15-year period, that loan is reduced by 1/15 every year. If the homeowner decides that they're gonna sell the house before the 15 years is up, they need to pay that money back, and that money would go back into the CPA. If they stay there the full 15 years, then the loan is forgiven. And that's how the program works.
As I understand it, there's precedence for this kind of program in the CPA statewide. That's
Correct.
important. I wanted to tell you all, in the interest of transparency, that this was voted 8-1 in favor by the CPA. One member felt that the language of MGL 44B, which is the CPA Act, concerning whether or not however, there's a line in here right after the bold section on this paper that I gave you, that Jamie provided. However, that funds expended pursuant to this chapter shall not be used for maintenance, and he was concerned that the legality of the language, he is a lawyer, prevented us from using funds like this, and the same will be said for the Housing Authority's accommodation request for maintenance. And we felt, as Jamie explains in this email I provided to you, that the language, first of all, and all of us felt the same way, is fairly ambiguous as to whether or not this is allowed. And we felt the where I highlighted, Housing Authority's reasonable accommodations request and housing partnership rehab program can be reasonably justified and funded under preservation and support for community housing. We felt that our interpretation, which we've learned, local CPA committees have a lot of autonomy, in a sense, in interpreting the law. And since there was precedence for this and it hasn't been challenged, we felt very comfortable, 8 of us, in approving this. And secondly, the money is not being used frivolously. We are doing something that improves affordable housing in East Hampton. So I felt fairly comfortable in voting for it, as well as 7 other members. But I wanted you to know what the minority person on it, and when we actually brought it up for a vote, he was kind of agreeing with us, in a sense, at that night when we voted on it at the last meeting we voted on it. So he still voted no, but that's where he was. Mayor Katcher.
So, if you don't mind, I would just like to, I put this forward, this appropriation request forward, for funding to the city council, because I have to say, in all the time I've been here, housing rehab is really, one of the top, I think, one of my top favorite things. It is a win-win for everybody, and I am really excited that this is out of the target area, because the lines in the list of people that want this, and it prevents blight, it helps people that would not be able to do, a lot of these things are up to code, they're health, they're structural. So this is a funding request that I wholeheartedly support, and I hope that the council will approve it, and I see no downside to it at all.
Well, we didn't either, most of us. And also that mention of the code, one of the things I liked about it was improving these homes that are eligible to get up to code. And code is written because it's a safety issue, for the most part. So we felt pretty good about it.
And the criteria is really strict for these people to even be, considered and eligible, and then the list, so.
And the other question that came up with this and the housing homebuyer program is oversight. And the planner indicated in an email to all of us that this had been done before, and the planning department would be responsible for overseeing and monitoring the subcontractor, filing financial paperwork, coordinating legal review, and other administrative duties. I think Jessica alluded to that. It's very carefully monitored. It's not like we're handing the city's money to managers outside of us without oversight. Do you have any questions on this before I go into the home buyers program?
You said there's precedents across the state. You said this has happened before. The precedents here, this has happened before here.
Yes.
We've done this.
Yes, we
Oh,
did.
we've done it here, yeah.
When I first started, so almost 5 years ago, it had already been appropriated, and it was in the process.
Under Stuart Beckley.
Under Stewart, and it was, it was 4 units is what ended up wrapping up.
And that's also what sold us on, it's also been happening statewide, it's not just here, so.
Jess, just because I didn't quite understand what you said. So the targeting, going toward an out-of-target area. Run that past me one more time.
I should have brought the map. So,
I remember the map.
You remember the map. So the target area is,
That's the community block grant
that's the
target
community
area.
block grant target area, and we're only allowed to spend CDBG funding within that target area.
Okay.
These houses are outside the target area. That's what we're trying to focus on, is folks that have called us and said, we need assistance, we'd like to be put on the list, and we say, we'll put you on the list because we may be going for CPA funds to do out of target, but you're not actually eligible for CDBG funding because your house isn't in the right location.
Thus, the whole question of CPA funds versus CDBG
Right,
funds.
so the focus is to.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Same concept, just different funding pool.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly, and we have a very long-standing relationship with PVPC. They've been running our housing rehab program for years, so we have a very, they know the drill, we've got the drill down,
It runs perfectly. It's definitely perfected, and then a lot of these, they're paid up, the liens are released, and they
Yeah,
come to,
that's great.
they come to me to sign off on, and then they're recorded. Or once in a while, people sell a little before that, and, so I have never seen an issue with these
Most
in
of-
all the years we've been doing them.
Yeah, and most of the individuals that take advantage of this are elderly. We have
Yep.
a lot of elderly clients, people who want to stay in their homes but just need a little bit of help to bring it up to the code that they need to be.
And it is income eligible too, but it just means that they're not in that specific area, for CDBG, but it still is income related.
And do they pay back? Do they only
If-
pay if they sell it?
Only if they sell it.
She was telling you about the 15
Yeah,
years.
but
That's-
there's no actual money changing hands, it just
If they
decrements.
sell it, there is.
Right,
If
but
they
But if
sell
they
it within
don't,
7 years.
every year it goes down a certain
Right.
percentage
Correct.
until
Right.
after 15 years.
Right, it's gone.
So if they sell in year 7, do they pay
Yes.
8 years? Or do they pay all 15 years?
No, they pay the amount of years remaining on the loan.
Okay.
Yep.
It depreciates every year.
Yeah,
For 15 years.
1/15.
After 15
Yeah.
years, it's gone, but if you sell it in 7 years, then you
Gotta
pay
pay
the
the 8.
remaining balance that you would owe on it.
Got it.
So the first-time homebuyer program, who wants to talk about that? Do you want to talk about that, Kathy? This is also something that was voted on. This was voted on 9-0 because the language on your thing, the bottom, section 2, completely supports this program for CPA, so nobody had an objection to it. It was voted unanimously. Go ahead, Kathy.
The design for this program is well known throughout the state. It's done by a number of nonprofit agencies. The one nearest to us is the Valley Community Development Corporation in Northampton. And so we wanted to bring this program to East Hampton and into East Hampton. So it's a similar concept where a deferred payment loan is given to eligible first-time homebuyers to assist them with down payment and closing costs. The buyers are required to receive education about being a first-time homebuyer, and there's also an income eligibility criteria. It's slightly different than the other one, but it still exists. And the mortgage products, most of the banks or whatever mortgage products are offered to first-time homebuyers have a requirement that a certain amount of the buyer's own money goes into the down payment and closing costs. So this is like gap funding. This is funding for people who meet income guidelines and have never been able to save the amount of money that's needed to buy a home for those particular costs. They can meet the mortgage payments, but they can't get that initial piece of money. So this program, the budget proposes that 6 buyers receive down payment assistance, down payment and closing cost assistance. They're required to participate in the counseling and education program that would be offered by the vendor. And there's also a line item for some lead testing if that's a requirement, lead testing in the host home. And then an item for administrative costs for the vendor to basic rent, utilities, that kind of thing. So the total amount of the request for that program is $75,000. You have questions?
The the counseling and education, it says 45 participants.
Oh, yes. There are always many more people that are interested in buying a home that can actually buy a home. And the counseling and education program, for example, that Valley CDC runs is an ongoing program year-round. Just about every month they hold a first-time homebuyer workshop. Very often the banks sponsor or underwrite that, so their workshops are held in the community room in the local banks. And one of the things that I like best about this counseling education piece is that sometimes people find out that they're really not in a good position right now to buy a home. And that's really important that they understand that and also understand the steps that they need to take in order to make that happen. So it's a broadly based program and is not geared just to 6 people who would.
So we basically fund the teachers for it, and up to 45 people can attend.
That's correct.
There was a thought that some of the lawyers and bankers involved in real estate would volunteer for this. It's in their best interest if they can get some of these home buyers to consider. They don't do it because they want to advertise their own work, but they feel that I guess they've had success in getting volunteers, so we don't have to pay that directly.
And again, I wholeheartedly support this. Valley CDC uses our upstairs area for these classes. These classes are, to me, the knowledge that people pick up, and there are, I know personally of people that have not only benefited from the classes, but are actually able to buy their first home through this. And again, the criteria is really strict, but the education is phenomenal. And we are thrilled to let Valley CDC use our upstairs for these. And when you see the people coming in for these meetings on a monthly basis, it's very exciting. So again, there's criteria, it's based on your income, but it allows people to get the down payment for their home, but not only that, to get the education to know if you can afford it.
And
Great program.
We asked for, this budget, I think, was developed from the Valley CDC, the budget you see here, so it has some basis in precedence. And a vendor would be contracted for this, to administer this. RFP would go out from your office once this is approved. And we would find a vendor who would act for it. Again, we still have oversight. We don't hand it to them.
No. I'm a control freak.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, are you aware of our planning department? Yeah, it's all over.
No, really?
All this
I
is
didn't
over.
think so.
All of this is overseen in the planning department, and the reporting of these are very cumbersome.
When you sent me this email that said that the planning department would be overseeing, I said, oh, that's okay
Yep.
now, we're not worried. Because I
And
know
they're not,
that Jess will.
and they're not new.
Right.
They're not new. These are programs that we've had
Yeah,
for.
it
We've
is-
had in the past,
for
since
many years.
we had before my time
Mhm.
under CDBG, we ran a first-time homebuyer
Mhm.
program. So we have, we know what the process is for the monitoring. Susan Pena, who's in my office, who's the CDBG coordinator, she's pulled out all the first-time homebuyer files. We're going back and looking at the process and how it works. So, so I have support staff who has managed this program in the past, and, I think it'll be fine. It's not too complicated. It's just making sure all the paperwork is getting submitted and monitored, so.
And the CPA committee unanimously supported this, so.
So again, my question is, was this formerly under CDBG and now we're asking for it in the CPA funds?
It's a hard program to fund under CDBG because of the grant process and how the points are distributed and how the types of projects that Department of Housing and Community Development want to see CDBG projects used for. Social services is kind of it's funded, but it's tough. So in the last time we did it was when the economy tanked, and so it was very hard for folks to meet that low mod criteria and find a house and be creditworthy. So it's it's a very select group of individuals that can really qualify for this program because they still need to meet the income qualification, but they still have to be creditworthy too. And so So that was the last time we actually managed it, was during the housing crash.
Okay.
And refresh my memory, how do they repay?
It's a 5-year.
5-year repayment,
Yep.
but it's not a deferred one like.
It is, it's the same. It's a deferred payment loan for 5 years instead of 15.
So we are actually giving them the money after 5 years.
Yes, so what we're trying to prevent is anybody flipping, basically. So
Flipping a
that's-
home.
Flipping a
Right.
home.
That's
That's why,
right.
that's why the DPLs are in place. So you don't want somebody to take the money and then sell it next year,
Mhm.
so.
And is the 45 divided equally among the 6, or is it kind of, somebody needs 5, somebody else needs 9? Or is it
Probably
kind of that kind of thing?
depends.
It's
Yeah.
individual, yes.
Okay. And last question, I think, maybe. Jamie, are, in this email where where you've got section 2 definitions down here, is
Can you
that
see it?
relevant to the first-time home buyer?
Yeah, so that was, from the Mass General laws explaining what
CPA can be used
CPA
for.
money can be used for and how the committee and the planning department feel that this can be justified
Meets
under,
that.
and it meets the requirements and it can be funded
Okay.
without.
Okay.
That's less ambiguous than the other, in my opinion. That's pretty straightforward.
Alrighty.
All right, well, although this is 2 programs, it is a single supplemental appropriation request, so I'm just gonna ask for a motion to approve the entire 192,500.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Finance Committee unanimous support. I might ask if, because you're so knowledgeable in this, that both of you attend the council meeting.
Sure.
It is a large amount of money, we might get questions. And that's this Wednesday at 6:15. Okay, thank you.
Next one, wait, today is Wednesday, so next.
Oh, next
A
one.
week
Okay,
today.
all right.
In 45 minutes.
I got children to feed, I can't.
You've got a house to buy or something.
House is bought.
House is bought.
House to move.
House to move. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, we'll try to
Thank
keep
you,
your taxes
Jessica.
down
I'll see you
over there.
Monday.
Yes.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thanks.
The next item I want to do is I want to get the other CPA stuff out of the way. So let's try the 20,800 CPA funds for improvements to Mutter Field. John, no? Marty.
Marty Klein.
Marty. I get you guys mixed up because I don't see you.
I hope not.
Sorry. Why don't you explain it? This
No,
was approved.
I'd be honored if you thought I was.
9-0 by the, has to do, in the projects, he has a budget in the back. CPA felt it was good. We did cut the autistic sculpture they wanted, but, so we didn't just blanket everything, we did cut something in the whole. These are pictures, I don't know if you saw them, of the trail.
Yep.
That he is gonna talk about. Go for it, Marty.
This particular request is for 3 things at the new accessible trail that the Pascoma Conservation Trust has built between East Street and East Green Street on a parcel that we own. And the 3 things in this request are, we wanted to build a connector between the loop trail that we have around the meadow and our existing Brickyard Brook Trail goes behind Mountain View Farm, and that trail's been in existence for over 10 years now. It's our most heavily used trail, and we thought it would be great to connect the 2, even though the Brickyard Brook existing trail, the old one, is not accessible. So what we've done is we've made probably a, 30-foot continuation of the loop trail that goes into the woods where we have had a memorial bench and a rock that also commemorates people.
Is that
Well,
this?
no,
No?
but I'll explain that next.
Okay.
And so now we have a nice sitting area and sort of a overlook over the brook there. And we're adding an accessible bench to go in there that the trust is paying out of its funds. And it's really a
Do you have
nice
any
spot
other-
so that people have a chance to get
I saw
out of
the
the
pictures
field
I have,
and into the
sorry.
forest.
Is any of these representative of
No,
what you
because
just
probably
talked
at the
about?
time I put the request in, it wasn't
Okay.
started. So.
Yeah, they're
I'm
from the
gonna-
original request,
I'm gonna
that's all.
get to those next.
Okay.
So that was one component. The second one is, one of the parts of the trust mission is educational, and so I'm ordering 5 interpretive signs from a company in Illinois that makes beautiful colored signs. They have a 10-year warranty for parks and trails, and these signs are going to be placed at different points around the trail and are going to explain various things to people, such as one's going to be about Mount Tom, because we have a great view of the mountain from there. Another's going to be about pollinators, what role they play in nature. Invasive plants is another one. There's a couple more I can't think offhand right now, but and so those will be in our hands by the end of the year. They take a while because they're custom made, and it's a couple of months.
How big are they?
How big are they? They're, let's see, 20 by 20, and the biggest one, of course, with the invasive plants, is 24 by 36, so it's.
And who installs them once they arrive?
We will,
Okay.
yeah.
Could you touch on, there is money also being provided by your committee, by this trust, I mean.
For the signs?
For
Yeah.
all of this.
Oh, yeah, we contribute.
This
to
isn't
the
just
project.
CPA funded, just so. you know.
No, CPA is definitely.
Total matching fund, 67,000.
Right, and we've had actually more than that. We got 47,000 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, DCR, Recreational Trails Program. That was our first grant, and we've had, I haven't had a recent total, but around, probably approaching 20,000 in individual donations, and we expect more will come in. And we're trying to establish a maintenance endowment so that we can have some money to take care of the trail over time. And the third component of this request is butterfly gardens. So we hired a couple of stone workers from Ashfield, and they came in and built these kind of rectangular with round corners, 2 feet high. And we have a local woman who's a horticultural wizard who has donated the plants, and because it's been so dry, we have held off on planting them. But by the end of the month, we're going to put soil in there, and we're going to plant them with native flowering plants that she's already purchased and has been taken care of all summer in the ground. So we wanted to do that because the meadow there is just loaded with invasive plants, and we are going to be rehabbing that over the next few years, bringing it back after we kill some things off to what it might have looked like if all these nasty plants hadn't gotten in there. But we wanted to give people an idea of some beautiful native flowering plants that they might have seen, but can't see right now. So it's going to be one more thing along the trail that will give people something to look at and experience in other sensual ways. So
And this
if you haven't been to the
qualifies
trail yet, it's getting rave reviews, and you really need to come. We're having a grand opening on October 8th.
Just gonna
You're all
ask
getting
that.
invitations.
That's the whole accessible trail?
Yeah.
But this isn't started yet, has it, or has it started?
What's that?
This part of it, the accessible trail,
Connector.
the additional funding. Have you started it and this is gonna,
All the work is done now.
oh, so this is gonna.
The only
pay
thing
off?
that we haven't done
Forget.
is fill up the planters and plant them, because they're built, and the signs. They
So
can
this
take a
funds
while.
pays you back, or I forget.
Yeah, we get reimbursed.
This
right.
is a
We submit
reimbursement
our
of funding that's.
Invoices to
You've
the
already,
city.
I got it.
You've already
Right.
spent the money.
Yeah,
That's correct, right, Jim?
so we
spent their money.
we paid
Yeah, but they
whatever.
have to submit bills to you to get
Yes,
this
yes.
funding.
They-
It's reimbursable.
Right, so the first 185,000 from CPA. when you
Previous
talk-
CPA funding's in April,
It
yeah.
was 180.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that,
I think we're all done with
would-
it.
yeah, that's, there's some money left on invoiced, but it's all been, they spend it, they submit their invoices and we reimburse them.
Okay. Good. Any questions? This qualifies under open space and preservation, so we loved it.
And recreation also.
Yes?
I just wanted to add a word. My name's Ann Holstein.
Okay.
I live actually on Mutter Street.
Okay.
But I've been working on doing some volunteer work for towards getting the trail going, and I go there a lot, and just want to say, in terms of community support, interestingly, over the past couple months, as it gets finished, I've seen, whenever I go, there's like a lot of parents with strollers, which is interesting to me. I mean, yes, people could go on the bike path, but this is so nice because you can't have bikes and rolling things on it. Toddlers can get out and run. You can do your stroller, you know, two people together, which on the bike path, you always gotta move over and stuff. So I think just from observation, it's getting great use and really good community support. So the fact that you're putting community preservation money into it, I think will be really appreciated by everyone. And also just say, in terms, I've done some fundraising on my own, and some of our local churches have contributed, because I think especially for the disabled opportunity that's there. So in so many
Accessible,
ways,
that's
it's a
the big
great
word, yes.
addition. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's awesome, it's exactly what the CPA was designed to do, and I love these kinds of projects, because it's not that active recreation like football, it's passive recreation, it's used by a broad spectrum of people, especially now, being accessible to handicapped people is great, it's just fantastic.
The sort of subtitle I created for this project is "A Place in Nature for Everyone."
Nice.
That's a nice thing.
Nice.
And so we built it specifically so that people who do have handicaps would be able to get out in nature in a safe environment where they wouldn't have to worry about bicycles and whatever behind them. And it's actually turned out to serve a lot more than that, and the people in the surrounding neighborhoods are thrilled about it, have been using it since December. We've installed a couple of picnic tables there, we have a rain shelter. It's really a beautiful place.
Are dogs allowed?
Dogs are allowed on leash, and if you have a plastic bag. There was a time, it was about a couple months ago, and I was leading a tour for some people. They came from Michigan, and they're touring accessible trails around the country with their handicapped son. And so I gave them a tour of the trail, and in the course of going around it, I had to pick up 6 piles of dog crap on the
That's
trail.
terrible.
So I took a photograph of one of those.
That might be one
Yeah,
of
it
your
was on
signs.
Facebook.
And I posted it, I put
Yeah.
up signs, but I also posted it on Facebook with like, are you kidding me?
Is there any benefit to putting in a pole with
You know, we thought
dog
about it,
bags?
I don't want
That-
people to get the idea it's a
Encourage it.
dog park, it's
Right.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And so miraculously, whether it had to do with my Facebook postings or not, I haven't had that problem, we haven't had that problem since. It's been
Facebook does some
pretty
good.
free. And I'm in the process now of raising awareness, and I put a post on Facebook last week, and I think I had, geez, last time I looked, I don't know, 140 likes and 20 shares, which, if you're not on Facebook, we're reaching hundreds of people that way
Yeah.
that wouldn't have known about it otherwise.
How
So
did this, is that how, I'm wondering how the woman with her son found out about you, about the trail?
She
Maybe.
actually works for the National Land Trust Organization, and there was I guess there was a posting on their email server or something that somebody passed along to me, and I wrote to her and I said, hey, you're out this way,
That's
come on by.
wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful, thank you.
Oh, thank you. We're so grateful that you've supported us this way, because it was an expensive project, and
It's
we're just a little-
205,000 out of
little volunteer organization,
Yeah,
so
that's great.
this really made the difference for
What's
us.
the
So let you
CPA?
know, you're no little organization. You
Well-
guys are everywhere.
Well, our impact is big, but our, in terms of numbers.
And I
we're
want to know
small.
the names of those flowers after.
Oh, yeah, Leslie will have a complete
Any more
list
questions,
available.
counselors? I'll take a motion.
motion to approve the allocation of
$20,000.
$20,800 to
Butterfield, Brickyard,
Butterfield.
Rook Accessible.
what he said.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Well,
There he
now
is
I
there.
find it. There it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, this Wednesday, if you want to come in case there's questions.
I'm going to be out of town, Dan. Do you want me to write a letter to the council?
How about John? Is there?
John's going to be there as well as some other people from the
You don't
trust.
need
that's
to, you don't
great.
need to be here, as
Yeah.
long as somebody from the trust is there.
Okay, I
In
didn't
case
know.
there's questions, but this one is pretty,
I know.
I think it's, we've already approved 185,000. It's not like this is new, so I'm not worried about it.
No, I'm not either.
Just if you can have someone there in case, okay?
We'll have some numbers there
All right.
from our small organization.
The last one
Thank you.
on the CPA is the $40,000 for another accessibility request. And this had to do, well, if you remember, we put forward the fire suppressions from the Housing Authority, and at the time, she mentioned she wishes she could do ramps and things because they have been buying them. He says, why not? And as Jamie has indicated, in the same way, we felt this isn't maintenance, this is preservation of housing and affordable housing. So I'm gonna give you a couple of pictures. These were in the mail. These are the kind of ramps they've done on their own before. Tim Kane is the maintenance supervisor there. Deb is having surgery or something, can't be here tonight. And he could explain, these are, I can hand you, and a lot of the, this is all the application stuff, and some of the, you can see some of the funding. These are, they've had to buy them in the past, so they've had to use their own funding, and this will assist them greatly. They actually only asked for 30, we upped it to 40 so they can get a lot of the ramps done.
And where are these
CPA.
gonna be?
Where are they?
Anywhere?
Can you?
Where it boils down to is if a resident that's lived there, say, a year or a month or a week, suddenly decides, it's hard for me to get in and out of my apartment. Mass state law considers that a reasonable accommodation if they get a doctor's note. And they bring that reasonable accommodation to us, and we have to alleviate the barrier. that
So
they-
this is anywhere, this isn't a particular
Exactly.
housing facility?
It's not just ramps in general, but ramps is the biggest thing. This is,
There's also shower
rolling
accessible.
shower units. It wouldn't go so far as to like actually remodeling a unit for full accessibility, because that's beyond the scope, that would be beyond a reasonable accommodation. But basically, it's just the removal of barriers to allow the residents to live a regular life is what it
And
comes down to.
It, just to answer your question more clearly, it's any house that's under your authority.
Correct. These
Because these are-
particular ramps, the $6,000, $5,000 ramps, are actually at Cliffview and Sunrise, which is a single-story building. Or a single step-in building is what they call it. If we were to put one of these over at Glad Acres, those ramps would run anywhere from 14 to 16 on up, because they have to travel at a certain pitch for a certain distance of time. After you get across a certain amount of distance, there has to be a rest period.
So you have to have a landing.
A level point, and then continue on with your mathematics as to how long the ramp has to be.
So these might, if you had to put some in over there, you'd only do 3 over there. It's $40,000.
That's it.
Are these removable?
The-
These that we're looking at
Those
here?
particular ones are removable. Some of the ones that we've done in an effort to save money is brought in a concrete company and just poured a solid concrete ramp. The problem with those is they become a maintenance issue after that. So that's why we kind of stick to these, because
And you
Those
can
fall apart
remove
in the
these and
winter?
move them, if someone doesn't need it in the future, you can move them to
we
another
have
house.
storage space that we can utilize. The nice thing is these all break down. They're
Mhm.
just set screws, they break down. You can set them together. You can store them up in the rafters of the sheds if you had to. They're-
I like these, but you have to do what you have to do. I should again tell you that one of the same member felt that this was maintenance. I didn't feel it was maintenance, because these are
I
new
can
items.
assist you with clarifying that, actually.
Well, you don't have to, because this is about interpretation of the CPA law, and 8 of the members, again, it's the same issue as it was for the rehab program. Is this maintenance of affordable housing, or is this preservation of affordable housing? So it was the same person who felt that it wasn't, but we all felt that our interpretation and the precedents for doing this
I have the
Go ahead.
CPA funded ramp improvements at the Housing Authority, I think it was 2008, and then again in 2010.
So this has been done before, right?
So there's a wooden ramp going into.
Okay. The new ramp at Cliffview's community room was
Right.
paid for via.
Right.
That was 14.
And then there was also the that was with the accessible bathroom.
The
and-
bathroom
The
at the
bathroom,
same
and it
time.
was the ramp.
Yep, at the community room.
Yeah.
So just
At
so
Cliffview.
the CPA
Not a precedent.
has funded accessibility improvements at the Housing Authority
Mhm.
multiple times.
And again, this has to do with accommodation, reasonable accommodation, which we felt, geez, that's important for people who have to live in these homes because of their affordability and don't have the money to improve the home to a ramps, et cetera, so.
And you know, you're looking at these pictures, I love that these are removable, but you're looking at one step
Right.
can prevent you from living in your own place.
That's.
And that's sad,
One of
but-
them
It's
was
very
like,
sad.
was just like this tall
Yeah.
on one of
Yeah.
these
Yep,
pictures.
once you experience that, it's a matter of, not living in your own home anymore.
Mhm.
So question, this packet that we got,
I sent her what you sent me today.
I'm trying to, would this have come from you or Tim, right?
Correct.
It came from
It's-
the housing.
I wrote
authority.
up that whole.
One is for 30,000, but I don't see that another 10,000.
That was done at the.
CPA, as I said, increased it to 40. It was our choice. They requested 30, and we just said, that's not enough. Because, as she explained, no, to be honest with you,
Everybody's gotta be a hero.
we felt that there wasn't enough money to afford, considering some of the ramps cost
So if there's any leftover-
$15,000.
So this is payback, 30,000 you've already spent.
No.
No, this would go into a holding point.
Okay, it's
And
for
then
future.
As we needed a reasonable
Pull from it.
accommodation comes up, we submit it and.
So it would be run the money would stay in an account in the city's, one of the city's accounts, when the Housing Authority comes to, either me or the CPA committee or Jessica with the request, the reasonable accommodation is gonna cost $10,000 and these are the bids that we've received. Then we'll pay the contractor directly or we'll reimburse the Housing Authority depending on, whatever we
Yep.
determined at that point.
There won't have to be a ramp, any request to comply with ADA.
Yeah, there was a
Right.
shower
Right.
install
Right.
thing.
It's a shower
and-
install.
But it has to be a reasonable accommodation, so there's.
Right.
And
there
it-
needs to
And
be
that's a definition, there's a definition.
Yeah,
for
It
that.
goes all the way through, they've gotta have doctor's notes, they've gotta have, I mean, we've done reasonable accommodations as far as even allowing a woman who has difficulty breathing, allow her to run her air conditioner in the wintertime. That's a reasonable accommodation, they just bring you a note, and we continue to pay the electric bill. That's the way those are. But
Okay.
we would never come to you for paying our electric bill, I'm just
Right.
saying.
These are for
Taking
these are
a-
for the
getting a bath
physical
or a shower.
capital.
Yeah,
But this,
exactly.
this allows them to use these funds rather than their own funds to do these ramps. And the reason we did extend it, we debated it at length, was because the cost of these ramps is pretty high.
It is.
He mentioned if he had to do a couple of steps over there, that's 15, 16 grand.
Yeah.
I mean, you only get 2 of them done at 30, so we felt we ought to try and give them enough funding to do at least a few at the beginning. If they're only 5,000, that's only those one-step ramps you saw pictures of.
Yeah.
But you're looking at other housing areas where you need to do larger ramps, right? So
Okay.
there wasn't a frivolous reason, it was just.
No way.
And the guidelines on these ramps are really stringent through the building inspector's office because of the grade. They have to be, obviously up to code for a certain grade for obvious reasons, and like you said, like a resting area, so they're
Yeah.
pretty strict.
They say what size bolts they can use to hold it down for
Right.
weight distribution. You can't just put one of these up without knowing what you're doing.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Question, Dan? No. Take a motion.
Motion to appropriate $40,000 from the CPA to the Housing Authority for reasonable accommodation accessibility.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Dan, is
Thank
that
you, Tim.
Wednesday too?
Yes, all of the things on our
Will you be
agenda
able
are
to-
Wednesday.
Will you be able to be there, or somebody
Deb
from?
or I, depending on how fast
Right.
or,
I don't expect, again, to have any issue with this. It is about accessibility and accommodation, but,
it's good to have somebody
Be
there.
good to have
just to
somebody
listen in,
there.
so.
okay?
All right, I
At
thank you all.
6:15.
Thank you.
6:15
Very much.
Wednesday. All right, let's go to, oh, we can do the $8,543 item. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow night. Want
What
to
are we doing?
explain the
This is
reserve
just-
fund fire medical
Right.
expense from Chief Mater?
So
Go
I'd
ahead,
be,
Karen.
I'd be happy to explain this. This is just a typical old bill, invoices that come in after the fact. Our fiscal year closes June 30th. We are really very progressive about calling to see if there are any invoices that are out there, so because we cannot use fiscal 17 money to pay fiscal 16 expenses. But no matter how, how much you reach out to any of your vendors and you're waiting for things to come in, they still come in later on. And this was something that they thought was not going to be done, and, one of the things was done the very end of June, so they thought it was gonna be done in July, which would have been next year's funds. So that's what these are. So we can't process these without, that's exactly how we process them as an old bill.
You need to ask us for the funding because it has to be a supplemental.
Because it's last year's.
Transfer.
Right. We can't pay anything out of
You
this
can
year's
use
money.
reserve fund, but you can't use
We
existing
can't
budget
pay
money.
anything out of this year's money that was last year's bill. So that's why it's nicknamed an old bill, because that's what it is. So we need a transfer, and you'll notice,
But it's from the reserve fund, which is this year's money. I'm not
It-
understanding that.
okay, so we use the reserve fund as our source of revenue
Mhm.
to fund these. So if these bills, all these medical bills, vehicle repairs happened in July, we just pay them out of the fire budget. But we
Right.
can't because they happened
But
in
in June.
June. So we have to use, whatever, reserve fund is what we chose to use here. We could use stabilization, but why would we?
But you're
So-
using funding that hasn't been previously appropriated in fiscal 17, if I understand this correctly.
Right.
For specific fire department expenses. In other words, you have to
It-
find
it's-
either reserve fund, free cash, or stabilization to pay these bills because they haven't been appropriated.
No,
I'm wrong.
that's not actually the way it is. We could pay these, it doesn't matter, we could pay them out of our budget because you don't approve every single thing in the fiscal 17 budget. We have
Right,
he has
right.
he has a vehicle repair line item in his 17 budget.
Right.
But this isn't 17 money. We cannot use 17 money to pay 16 expenses. It's last year's expense. So that's why it's called an old bill, because it is. It's not this year's bill,
I
it's last
understand
year's bill.
that, but-
So we have to put the money into that, a separate,
From
separate
20,
line.
so into the reserve fund, does money go that was quote-unquote left over from 2016? Like, so the books close on
Mhm.
whatever day the books close, June
Mhm.
30th? Every dollar is accounted for? Is there money that ends up in like a savings account and then that
Well, that's
rolls
what
to
our,
20?
that's what our, like
Is
free
that what
cash
the reserve-
becomes, and reserve is what we make it, that's part of our budgeted, we budget a reserve, but anything, as you know, anything not used in 16 floats into free cash for 17, which will be happening pretty soon, you'll see free cash certification. But we cannot pay for any invoice that we get in July or August, September, October. If that invoice, if that data service was in May or June, which is our last fiscal year, we cannot pay it out of this year's money. We have he has the money in his line items, but he can't pay it because it's last year's.
But yet we
It
can pay
occurred
it
last
out of the
year.
reserve fund.
We're not paying it out of reserve, so we're transferring money from the reserve fund into these line items, which is to pay an old bill.
The explanation then is that the reserve fund can be used to be transferred into the line item.
Exactly.
Even though that reserve fund was budgeted out of FY17 funding, the reserve fund can be used because it's
Right.
not dedicated to any department. It's
Right.
there in reserve, like
Right.
stabilization,
Right.
for these items. That's what I meant.
Right.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I got it now.
And could you have used free cash or?
We don't have free cash yet.
But if you had it, you could.
You could
Oh,
have.
yeah, if like, say
If it
this
was
is,
already moved
say this was
in.
October
Yeah.
and we have our free cash certified, then we could move money from free cash to pay this. We could
So this
use-
is an
I could-
accounting, really.
Exactly, I could use stabilization money to pay this, but it becomes a transfer no matter what way you look at it.
This was unbudgeted for FY17. It was budgeted for FY16, so to speak.
It's an expense in 16.
Mm.
An expense in a prior year's expense, whether
Mhm.
it's 16, 15, 14, cannot be paid out of this year's money.
Got it.
Got it.
Okay, good. Any other questions, guys?
No.
This seems straightforward.
Yep.
I'll take a motion. Dan, you're up.
All right. And motion for the following appropriation to move $8,541.21 from the reserve fund into two accounts, $1,837.86 into fire medical expenses, $6,705.35 to fire vehicle repairs for a total of $8,543.21.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Jane, you're up for your reserve.
We don't have a date on that yet, right, Dan?
It's this one? I put
Are you
them all
gonna
in.
do them all? Okay.
I don't mess around. I don't want to see old
You
dates
wanna-
by my agenda items.
No.
I don't want to see any agenda item.
Well, we haven't had any work to do for 2 months, so I don't think the
Oh,
counselors
there'll be no-
mind getting some work
There'll
done.
be no shortage.
Yeah. Well, then there'll be holdups. But I figured these are fairly straightforward, so we could get them. Do you want to explain a workman's comp, dear?
We had, at the time of the budget, we had received an estimate of a 25% increase in workers' comp.
25%. What's the reason for that? Too many people have applied for workman's comp? Is that why?
Rates of, insurance rates in general have
Gone up?
skyrocketed. And
Because there's more risk now.
Well, every year when we prepare our budgets, we ask our insurance companies, whether it's liability or workers' comp, you know, do we need to plan on an increase? Whether it's health insurance, liability, workers' comp, do we need to plan on an increase? And a lot of times it's yes. We love it when it's
No.
flat. But and on this particular case with workers' comp, it goes by your usage.
What's
Your
in there
risk.
now, Jane?
I'm sorry?
What's in there now, in the workers' comp budget? You said there's a deficit in that account.
Well, you can see what's in the budget and what you need. So this is what she's short, is the $12,750.
But is that gonna double it?
No,
No,
it's like 167, almost 168,000.
So, in other words, you got an invoice and you didn't have enough to pay it.
Exactly. She's $12,750 short.
Okay. That's why we have a reserve fund. Okay.
So 168 was budgeted,
Correct.
and it came in at 180 and change.
Whatever your invoice
Okay.
is, Jane.
It came in, oh, excuse me. The 168 includes the 111F, so the police and fire code safety. So the budgeted for workers' comp is approximately,
Well, it's your whole bottom.
no, because that's 111F.
You've got that in here.
So it's 168, and the bill is 145.67 for workers' comp and 39,953 for 111F.
So it's a combination of insurance
Correct.
needs that you have
Public
to pay
safety
out.
have their own policy.
Okay. So it's not just one policy, but it's workers' comp.
Correct.
2 policies. Okay, got you.
Okay.
Good. Any questions, Dan? Motion? Who's up for a motion?
Motion to transfer from the reserve fund for a deficit in workers' compensation of $12,750 to be transferred to workers' compensation and 111F fund. I said $12,750.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Thank you, guys. We're done with all of our things. The last thing I gotta do is this clerical need to actually approve the ordinance change, which we already approved the funding for the clerk's salary. Now we have to approve the ordinance. This is just
We have
being.
to approve it?
Oh, yeah. We've, if you.
Ordinance doesn't approve it?
Remember the pay plan? You may have done this. Pay plan has two things associated with it. One is the financial aspect of the pay plan.
Uh-huh.
The other is the ordinance, which approves the change in the pay plan. This
Okay.
is similar
Thank
to
you
that.
very much.
So it's typically sent to the same committee. So you know, the charter says a committee of the council must approve an ordinance. It doesn't necessarily have to be the ordinance committee. And because this was just like the pay plan, we always send both of those items to
Fine.
finance because they're associated so
Okay.
directly.
Yep.
So, in other words, this should have been
Yeah.
with us when we got
Got
this.
it.
And I didn't even know that there was an ordinance associated because we hadn't given her a raise in a long time, so.
Okay.
It's really just,
This is for Barbara?
it's just to make sure that everything is up to snuff with regard to following through on the salary, so
All right.
I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the amendment,
Section
this is
7.5.
Chapter 7, Section 7.5, the clerk to city council salary.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Okay, thank you. So, that's everything, I think. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Okay,
full hour.
is that 7 o'clock?
Yeah, thanks.
Good. We approve
Motion
these.
to adjourn?
All in favor? Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Hit the button.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you, Melissa.